You're listening to the Pace Radio Network, here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Good day and welcome to the Mushie Moment for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. How you doing, Cindy?
I'm doing really, really well. How about yourself, Steve?
I am doing really well now.
Excellent. I am just doing some sharing and then closing that off. Got her done. Hello, Chica.
She decided she wanted to come and cuddle right at the...
That's okay. We can always use an extra host, and I don't mind her.
Yeah, she doesn't say much, and she's way cuter than this one. Oh, yeah, I woke up this morning. It was a little chilly out here on the West Coast. It was, figured, I better get that heat running. And realized you got to make sure you got your gas all filled up if you're going to run that heat. Or cuddle up with the dog. Dog, get up here, cuddle.
So you've learned that you've got to make sure you've got gas the night before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Those steady learning moments through life where we just learn those little things that make our life better.
I'm just sending a message. Because we have a guest in the back. She was logging on as I said, I have to go live. It's the top of the hour. The producer came out. And so she sent a message here in the back room and said hi, because we didn't get a chance to chat with her ahead of the podcast. But that's okay.
But I'm really looking forward to chatting with her too.
Yeah, we've been kind of excited about this one for a while.
Should we bring her in?
Sure. Why don't you do some introductions, Steve?
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome onto the podcast, the one, the only, the incredible, and one of the most dynamic speakers that I have had the privilege of watching, Acacea Lewis. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I did not expect that. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. And I have to second what Steve said. The last 2 years going up to the conference, you have definitely, you're my number one speaker.
Man, thank you. You guys are my number one people. Like I like sticking out with. So, yeah.
So, we didn't get a chance to talk ahead of time. Steve and I usually start with the same question for everybody. We all kind of are in this world of psychedelic, natural earth, frog, fungi type medicine. And I'm always curious to what brought people to work with this medicine. What took you from this modern day world that they're shoving down our throats and brought you to say, oh, no, this is where I need to be. Yeah.
Well, this is the fun podcast. Like I'm on a ton of podcasts. Like I've had 4 this week. And everyone asks me the same question. And so I like to spice it up and change it up, because you give the same answer so many times. Everybody's going to be like, I've already heard her tell it. I'm going to just skip fast forward. So I'm just going to tell it like it is. Like I had an ex-boyfriend who was drug addicted, and I didn't know it at the time. And for my 16th birthday, he set it up so that I could have an experience. And looking back on it, I think I got to have my first big experience on my 17th, actually, because I went to an Eternal Harmony gathering. You know those rainbow gatherings that you go to? You know, as one does when you're a young psychonaut, you know? And I didn't intend to do any psychedelics, actually. I had no intention of it. I had just gotten out of a really bad relationship, you know, and my parents were, you know, calling the feds and stuff because, you know, you got an underage person in college dating someone that they don't like. You call the cops, right? Well, that's what they did. And so I was in the midst of getting over the fallout from that bad relationship and how these people with my ex. So I brought them, as one does, to the campfire where all the elders and all the experienced people are. And I'm like, oh, these bunch of weirdos. You know what? I'm just going to start throwing pictures into the fire. And they were like, oh, hold on. What are you doing? Like now I understand in context how crazy that must have looked to see some teenager, a bunch of pictures and note cards in her pocket, just throwing and flipping them off into the fire, going like, fuck you, you know? And so, you know, and I looked at the guy next to me and he was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm gonna fucking kill myself. And they were like, somebody get her. Like, where's her mom? Like, where's her family? Like, nobody's here. I drove up on my motorcycle. They're like, you have a motorcycle? I'm like, yeah, I have a motorcycle. As one does, you know? And then turns out my motorcycle got stuck in the mud, which actually ended up saving my life. And the guy who took my motorcycle home was the mushroom guy. And so the guy who drove my motorcycle, the back of his pickup truck, home from the Indian reservation that I was hanging out at the Rainbow Gathering on, he's the guy who was like Houston's biggest mushroom dealer at the time. I'm not going to give names. But he had some Pinalias from Hawaii, and he gifted them for me so I could take them on my birthday. And my boyfriend was the one who negotiated all of that out. He was the one who invited me, and then he trip sat for me my first trip, but he didn't tell me what a trip was. He didn't tell me what mushrooms were. And, you know, I was born with a psychedelic name, and my boyfriend has a psychedelic name. He still does, but he was addicted to meth at the time, so he doesn't remember most of this, you know. And his name was Osiris, and so you got a girl born named Acacea, a guy named Osiris. You know, there's bound to be mushrooms happening. It's just, you know, the underworld gods mandated it so. And, you know, I took these mushrooms outdoors at a very high dose at a museum where there was a King Tut was on exhibit, or Ramses. It wasn't King Tut, it was Ramses was on exhibit. And there was a botanical garden, and I loved botanical gardens, and I love butterflies. And so I got to hang out for the whole day on my first mushroom trip in a museum. And then when I got done with the museum and kind of had it with people, because the security guards were huffing my sage I'd given them because they had bad vibes. And I was starting to freak people out a little bit because I think they were starting to realize I wasn't a 10-year-old. But I sure looked like one. And I was handing out sage to anybody who would smell it, you know, see what would happen, because I could see them. But what I was looking at was energy in their body moving. And I was curious as to how I could experiment on the people I handed sage to see if their colors would light up. And I'm like, oh, your colors are lighting up. Oh my God, you know, this is great. You know, and they're like, what colors where, you know, crazy little kid. And so, you know, I kind of got away with being able to have a high dose trip in a normal setting. And I felt irritated because my boyfriend was like, well, if you just play it cool, no one will know that you're on mushrooms. I'm like, well, what does play it cool mean? Because you guys didn't tell me about what this was supposed to be like. And so do I look like I'm on mushrooms? He's like, well, when you do that, you look like you are. like this? And I'm like, he's like, yeah, like this. And I'm like, so keep my eyes like shut. I'm like, so now you look stoned. I'm like, okay, well, at least that's more acceptable. And so I was walking around trying to keep my eyes as squinty as possible and trying not to stare at people for long periods of time, because I noticed if I stared at people for long periods of time, something would happen. And so yeah, that was my that's how I got into it. I was mad that nobody told me they existed. And having come from a field in astrophysics, and I was studying astrophysics and geophysics in college at the time, even though I was about to drop out, I had one of those minds where I guess the mushroom was able to take whatever knowledge I had accrued to that point and show me what was useful and what wasn't. And from then on, we were friends. From then on, it was, I got to figure out what life is. I got to figure out what's the meaning of existence. Like, I got to find out, like, why physics is broken, why we can't explain things properly, and that became, my own personal quest for knowledge.
Wow.
Healing came later. First it was knowledge, then realization of needing actual healing came later.
That's fun. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never tell like this. I get on people's podcasts and I'm just like, I was named after a psychedelic plant. Yes, I was Googling DMT as soon as AOL came online. Yes, but that was an accident. My parents weren't giving me psychedelics. My parents didn't know about psychedelics. It was really my first ex-boyfriend who kind of, spurred that along.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's great for it's great for everybody that happened, actually.
Well, thank you. He became a Hebrew Israelite and transitioned fully to male, and I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but I really do appreciate that he trips that for me, because I think about young people with their boyfriends and their girlfriends, and I wonder how responsible they're being on mushrooms with each other. And mine would just walk me for like 13 miles down a single street where we wouldn't get lost, and just talk to me, and we'd walk all the way back. Well, all the way down the street, and I just talk and talk and talk and talk. And sometimes that's what you need to do. You don't need to be sitting people in front of television trying to get them to do puzzles and art with you. Sometimes people just need to decompress and experience their thoughts and emotions as they arise, in the order that they arise, without people's input.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that about him, that he was like, yeah, I know you got daddy issues. Yeah, you talk about your dad, talk about your mom, talk about whatever you want to talk about. And he just kind of let me dump, my thoughts. And then once I realized that all of that pent up, compressed emotion was the problem, after many years of taking psychedelics, that's become part of my central core Buddhist practices, to understand greater what obscurations, what obstacles my mind is creating for itself by clinging to certain negative feelings and emotions. And so,
To clinging to the negative. Yes.
Yeah, you just won't let go of the frying pan that's hot, It's like you're trying to cook some eggs and it's cast iron.
But the brain will look and go, hey, you should let that go. It's hot.
Yeah.
Let it go. It's hot. Yeah.
Let it go, let it heal,
Yeah. Well, you've because I got to speak with you. I was lucky enough to get to, spend time and chat with you at the Unicorn Festival, and your journey just absolutely amazed me, and your background and your connection through your birth and background to the various medicines around the planet, and the pathway you've walked in joining, or kind of getting them all to be synergistic and work together. You were one of the first people when I've been chatting about just healing in general, walking a healing path, where I wasn't saying something, you were talking about how this medicine can help here, this medicine can help here, this medicine can help here, we can use this one here, and if you bring them all in this way, and that really resonated with me, because a lot of people are focused on a medicine, but there's a pathway of medicines that speak different languages.
Nature is God's palette. I mean, if everything was the color blue, we would never be satisfied. And the way I like to look at it, I'm sorry for interrupting, Do you want to go ahead?
No, go.
I think of it like a spectrum, you know, like there's 5 elements, and like I think that there are specific plant medicines that kind of conveniently have the same colors as the 5 elements, but not any specific relationship that I know of specifically. Waters is or whatever. I'm not trying to reduce hypersimplify reductionist logic, super explain that, but what I'm saying is there's a spectrum in plant medicine of different types of teachers that work on different types of receptor sites in the brain and other places in the body, and that come from unique places. And I think that because everyone's unique, no one's journey is going to be a one size fit all, pop it in a pill approach, you know, to plant medicine. It's got to be unique to what that person has going through, and what kind of practices that person is pairing with those specific plant medicines. And if you don't combine internal action with external action, you're not going to be able to bridge a unanimous result, which is, i.e., becoming centered so that you can become aware of your intrinsic ability that is limitless ability that exists. And I think that there's a lot of people who think, you know, going to the Amazon a couple times is going to fix that, or taking a high dose is going to fix that, or smoking changa or DMT is going to get them to that plane or to that plateau, but they're not pairing it with something that is like a grounding practice that they can use outside of that experience to continue to cultivate that bridge, that relationship between self and the external world that needs to be in place for you to really benefit long term, I think. You know, I say all that to say, let's say you go to Peru and the shaman is praying and he's got songs and he's got a diet and he's got a way of life. That way of that life, those diets, those songs are all tools and technologies that he's using in addition to the ayahuasca. The ayahuasca is one component that you're getting to have the experience of having with him, which is a privilege and an honor. However, you yourself need your own songs and you need your own lifestyle that's healthy and your own beliefs of what to do right and what's wrong for you that are complementary to the ayahuasca for you to continue to build upon that foundation in your daily life, you know, of how you treat others and what plants and what foods you need to nourish your body and activities you're going to use to benefit others outside of being the guy who took ayahuasca and got the calling to become a shaman. Because, you know, we hear about that a lot too. So, you know.
Yes, that's an interesting thing that, especially in this time where the psychedelics are.
It's not so popular anymore because people start making fun of it. You know, we got folks like Mycopreneur who are making fun of the guy who decides that he's going to go do that. And that helps. That helps because you can't tell folks, you know, what to do, but you can give them an example of what's not a really good look, what's unethical. You can give them an example through contrasting, you know. And I think that when it comes to working with plant medicine, it's important that we contrast because we don't want to have a bunch of people thinking that they're providing benefit when they're creating harm. You know.
True. True. That was when we had Miriam and Anki on. We were talking about people that are utilizing some of the stuff without putting in reverence and ceremony into it.
Yeah, and then a lot of people think ceremony is a cultural thing. And so they get fixated on the nature of how ceremony looks in different cultures. But they're missing connection. They're missing compassion. And they're missing wisdom that comes from experiencing through life elders and community members and helping people to gain experience dealing with certain types of situations that are going to arise that position you to actually be in ceremony with somebody, which isn't just you making yourself feel better by creating a set and setting that you like, you creating a set and setting and a cause and condition that people can benefit from from experience, and those two things aren't the same. You know, you have to see what has helped and learn what has helped from people who have been helped, you know, and then apply those foundational principles to create the kind of conditions under which someone can help themselves, you know, because your preferred circumstance is not everyone's. And so that diversity, equity, and inclusion side of psychedelics, I think, is starting to become more important. And I think that that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's not a one and done. Through all of, you know, any of the teachings that I've had, whether it be via a school or elders or, you know, chatting with people, the misconception out there due to the Joe Rogans and the Mike Tysons is that this is a one and done. You're going to come take it. You're going to go off and you're going to be better. And people don't understand that it is exactly what you say. It is a lifestyle. It's not just doing the medicine. It is eating the right foods. It is, you know, working the shadow work.
Living in a way that is conducive to benefiting yourself and others.
Exactly, yeah.
But that gets kind of obscured, you know, by Western materialism. You know, they look at the mala before they look at the daily meditation practice. They look at the mindfulness practice before they look at the fourfold path, you know, that leads away from suffering. There's a cause of suffering. There is an end to the causes of suffering. There's a path that leads away from suffering, and there's an end to suffering. And that's the foundations under which Buddhists have utilized malas and have utilized chanting and have utilized mindfulness, you know, is to eliminate the cause of wrong action, which leads to suffering, through right action, right mindfulness, right concentration, all of these eightfold path, the noble truths path. And that eightfold path that leads away from suffering has lots of books and lots of not rules, but suggestions of things to think about that you're doing or not doing to help you align with benefiting others rather than being blind or having a blind spot. But that level of depth is unpopular in the psychedelic movement because people think that they're going to be locked into something, or they got some kind of dogmatic idea in their head that they think that once they start going deeper into a path that their commitment has to be to that path, but they don't understand that the practice is something that can be included no matter whatever else you're doing. It doesn't mean that you get obsessed with the practice and you do it like a job and it becomes your vocation and now you're a coach who only teaches that, you know. And Western materialism tells you that that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to identify with your path to make it a productive lifestyle, because in this Western world, we don't have a respect for monasticism like they do in the East, where you get your food and you get your shelter and you get your water and you're diving into the depths of consciousness itself to better yourself for the benefit of all human beings. That level of appreciation has not fully arrived, as Dr. Robert Thurman said in one of his interviews. To say Buddhism has arrived in the United States would be to say that the appreciation of what it means to renounce and to cultivate oneself for the benefit of all sentient beings has been fully realized by Westerners. And because we're in this Western materialist society that doesn't have a structure for spiritual people through which you're just going to get your food and water, and people are grateful to give you your food and your water and your alms and your shelter so that you can, you know, develop one's self completely to your fullest liberation potential, let's say, you know, to your fully enlightened potential that you have. Because there's not this structure in place, people are under pressure to make whatever spiritual thing they learn a part of their materialist support, you know, to be able to pay rent and bills and such. You know, and so people oftentimes glaze the surface, or if they go in at depth, they go in at depth to survive. And that creates many obstacles that arise in that journey. And a lot of people suffer a lot, because they need food and water and shelter, and they've got kids and they got people relying on them. And so they collect names and titles and activities that they do, in order to have, Santa's bag of gifts to give to the community. But the community also has to reciprocate, and finding a balance for that reciprocation is challenging in today's world when so many people who are suffering don't have the income or resources to even afford to be able to sit with people who are learned in that way in the West. And that's a major fundamental structural societal difference between Westerners practicing Eastern ideals and Easterners practicing Eastern ideals. Yeah. Or even indigenous people practicing indigenous ideas, because an indigenous community, ideally, you're the mother, daughter, son, cousin of the shaman. And if you go and decide that you want to give up your life to study with him, you might have to walk a mile to get to his house. But in today's world, we got to fly 3,000 miles to get to the shaman's house and give up, so much, and try to understand how they live in order to spend the amount of time needed with them to actually gain the sort of experience I'm talking about, versus the 6-week workshop that you paid $5,000 for. It's still not equivalent to having been born and raised there. Yeah. Even though it gives you some knowledge, and then you got to pay that off. So Western materialism pushes on us and it pressures us in such a way that we have to change the way that we go about working with plant medicine to accommodate the challenges that we face on a daily basis, and so, like you're saying, that one and done mentality mindset is what's being perpetuated partially by this capitalistic approach that says, you come to us, we'll give you the best possible experience. We have all the PhDs, and we have all the ceremony, we have all the teachers, we have all the priests and priestesses, to give you the best experience. And then you go back to work and work 9 to 5, and then CEOs and scientists and Silicon Valley tech people go to these things, and they come back and they're not satisfied. So they create their own things. And then they realize that they have further along to go, that they have not reached the highest point. And so a lot of these people just quit, their Silicon Valley jobs, and they quit their retreat center lifestyles, and they move to places like India. They move to the forest, and they try to gain this depth, but they have to understand the non-dual aspect of reality and how it works in order for that depth to stick more than on ego level of what I can get and how I can do, but more of how we can move together and liberate all sentient beings rather than just living in that dualistic self and other people. I am trying to help people type of Westerner mindset that we oftentimes get into, of my intentions being good intentions and using that as justification to create causes and conditions that make me feel better in the way that I help community, rather than make community feel better because they are in need of support genuinely. And so I think that's something that Westerners need to look at very carefully a little bit, put those glasses on from time to time. And as long as you're aware that you have that handicap, there's that limits and reduces the harm that can be created from not knowing that you are a Westerner with the handicap, And so, yeah.
Wow, that was awesome. This is a good time for us to take our little break. So we're going to take a few minute break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Acacea.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Camelford Lifestyle Shop, open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford, Ontario.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Are you looking for non-stop, continuous cannabis and psychedelic programming? If you are, then turn your browsers to 420radio.ca or paceradio.net, where you will find the 420 Pace re-rolled Saturday. Everything gets started at 8 a.m. Eastern Saturday morning.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Good day. We're back. We've got an incredible guest with us today, Acacea Lewis, and I'm hyped. Hey, you said you were already on 4 podcasts this week.
Yes.
Now, did any of them say, if this was an open platform and you could talk about whatever you wanted to?
No.
Well, I would love to provide that for you. Cindy and I would be honored to provide that space for you.
Oh, snap. Okay. Well, okay. Wow. Thank you. Are you sure about that? I'll give you a shout.
Yeah. No. We have to ask Cindy. I'm sure. Are you sure, Cindy?
Oh, absolutely sure.
Okay. Well, there's something cool happening. There's this psychedelic Buddhist conference coming up in February. I think you can register online for with the Psychedelic Sangha. And Dr. Bob Thurman will actually be there. That's Uma Thurman's dad. She was named for Niguma, actually, who was the founder of one of the founders of the Shangpa Kagyu lineage of Buddhism. I'm actually a member of. I'm a Upasika, and this is just a book. This is a book that talks about the treasury of our teachings by Jamgon Kong Trul, who wrote The Ocean and Treasury of Knowledge for, I think, many, many lineages. Naima, Shakya, the Lug, all of those. And so, we're having a conference talking about psychedelic Buddhism taught by doctors, lamas, monks, nuns. Robert Thurman was the first Western monk, in history of Tibetan Buddhism, and he spent a year as a monk. And he talks about his journey, learning that if he felt he was ultimately meant to become a monk, I think he would have been born in Tibet. And so he kind of made these changes, and he gave back his robes, and he teaches so many things. He's got so many great books out there. especially about Vajra yoga. Him and Michelle Lowe have a Naguma yoga program, and Tibetan yoga and Indian yoga are not the same. Tibetan yoga, you would normally have to be in a lineage and have been practicing for a very long time to have gotten to a certain point of proficiency to where you are permitted to receive certain teachings like Naguma or Naropa, the 6 yogas of Naropa and the 6 yogas of Naguma, which you normally get on like a 3-year retreat, that you're studying in silence and nobody's bothering you type of thing. But now Kali Rinpoche and some other teachers have been teaching Naguma yoga to myself and other individuals. And Naguma is a very unique figure in Tibetan Buddhism because not only is she a woman, she's a woman who meets the description of being dark brown skinned, with the face of a 16-year-old girl. And she is the founder of a lineage and school in Tibetan Buddhism, along with Sukha Siddhi, who was I think she was in her 60s. She was a 60-year-old woman who reached enlightenment late. I got kicked out of the house and, was wandering, and met a guru in a forest, and she reached enlightenment that way, after bringing the guru some beer and some pork, and so we've got 2 really interesting women figures as the heads of our Shangpa Kagyu lineage, and Karma Kagyu and Shangpa Kagyu. Karma Kagyu is Naropa's lineage, 6 yogas of Naropa, and Naropa University is named for Naropa, the Mahasiddha Naropa. And Naguma and Sukha Siddhi are the Shangpa, brother and sister of the same lineage, Kagyu. And we got Jamgon Kongtrul, who's one of the most prolific writers and philosophers and teachers, spiritual teachers in Buddhism, and many lineages of Buddhism. And so I'd say the most interesting thing to find out is that there's a lot more people working with plant medicine in the Buddhist community than meets the eye. Because, a lot of us, when we get to a certain point where our teachers give us instruction, we just get off the internet and just disappear, and I'm trying not to follow that pattern. I've already deleted my Facebook page. And Instagram might go next. It might just end up being a website and a storefront, and that's all you ever see. Other people's websites and stuff, because you get to a certain point where you realize, the motives that a lot of people have for just posting nonsense and stuff are really kind of obstacles in their life. You don't want to become an obstacle in yours as well. And so you start to reduce certain kinds of social distractions. And I think that a lot of people who take mushrooms also go through this period of realizing how much junk's going into their life. And if you do psychedelics mindfully, and I don't mean by avoiding your thoughts, I mean leaning into what you're thinking, not trying to climb out of the vice grip hold on your ego. If you let your ego be incinerated, just sit there and just, stand up against the wall and horse stance with it, really surrender. You're going to find out that you're not too pleased with your previous activities, and you might come to this juncture of self-realization where you realize the traps and you realize the kind of obstacles that are also, I'll say, stair steps or ladder rungs, if you let them be, to awakening on a certain level of freeing yourself from certain kinds of mental bondage. All these obstacles on the flip side are wisdom. That you can, once you realize it's an obstacle, I should say, you learn lessons from it. And those lessons, can be translated into wisdom teachings if you sit with them and contemplate, their meaning a little bit more than just saying, okay, this is something that was messed up. If you just look at it as being messed up, then you put this veil of judgment between you and it, and you create this schism between you. You say, I am over here and that is over there, and you don't give it a chance to dissolve, and become a part of your experience fully. You know, you've always got this wall in between you and it. And that's why I say that non-dual side of it. You know, it's understanding that the heart teacher says form is just form, but to simplify it further, that your big ideas about something are limited. Your big ideas are based on your life experience. And because you have lived every possible experience, and you're also not the subject that you are experiencing, that your perception is very limited in that way. And so the truth of the matter really is you don't have an opinion that can be applied ultimately from the perspective of separateness, to say that that thing over there I don't like based on my limited obscurations and proclivities should be something of I should allow it to disturb me, essentially. And so you give permission for it to disturb you the second that you put a wall up and say that over there sucks, you know, like the election and stuff, you know. And I love that the Tibetans don't seem very disturbed by it, you know. My Tibetan teachers are like, you know, that guy, yeah, you know, the karma. They look at the karma of how things arise. And so if somebody got to be something, we know it wasn't by accident. There has to be something that we're not seeing that led to the causes and conditions of something to appear in a beneficial way. Now, there's a flip side to that, which means that's not the ultimate truth either. In the future, that person could easily demonstrate signs of being absolutely the opposite of how they appear right now. And so ultimately, it's not static. And so there's this empty side of it where we just say plain, I don't know. And by saying, I don't know if this person is good, bad, evil, otherwise, we detach ourselves from the negative emotions that are in our own heads about them. And that detaching from that negative emotion is a liberation, because it allows you to witness and feel and devote compassion for that, you know.
Yeah, by letting it go, it creates space, and that space allows room.
Yeah, it creates spaciousness, and it gives you a bigger spiritual heart, I would say, but it gives you a bigger view of what's going on, and then you become a bigger person that way. You know, you become someone that a lot of people can feel safe with, because how the heck are people who are challenged going to ever heal if the people who can help them don't want to be bothered, you know, by them, or bothered by the thought of them? That instant prejudice is what keeps a lot of people from getting help. And so dissolving that prejudice is something that leads to deeper self-awareness, in such that nothing that we think is a separate occurrence is a separate occurrence on its own. It's a dependent occurrence. It's depending, and our emotions arising are dependent on us as well. And so the dependent occurrence happening doesn't have, you know, these characteristics that we add to it. We have a choice to add it, but a lot of times our brains move so fast, and that we're so used to pattern behavior that we just automatically do it. And the mushroom, if you allow yourself to really sit with it, it can pull apart these super close levels of consciousness that we mistake for being the same, and show us that there is this very thin veil in between, and we have a choice. We have a choice not to automatically label and assume. We have a choice not to push away. We have a choice not to create negativity. We have a choice to be empty. We have a choice to allow ourselves to be filled up with compassion before we jump to the other side of judgment, before we determine or create a distinction for ourselves, you know. And that takes slowing down. considerably.
That's part of why they keep society in trauma, because if you're in trauma, it's hard to slow the brain down because the brain's always looking for.
Constantly chomping at the bit, you know, just trying to get out, trying to get free, trying to help, you know, and that once you slow everything down, even in your head, a lot of people have these racing thoughts because they're not aware of how fast they're moving when they're being still mentally. And then you have to put a stick in the mud to make sure that you stay still, you know, because the first thing, when you realize stillness, then your mind starts racing again about stillness.
Yeah. Know? Oh, yeah, look, you saw it. Oh. Yeah.
That was so cool, you know, and then we get so caught up on the coolness factor of how good it feels to be still, and then we're not still anymore. So, that's why I think having that daily grounding practice is really important, because then you start to eat foods, help your metabolism to move more in a balanced way when we're not having hypertensive episodes and we're not suffering from physical anxiety due to certain hormonal imbalances by certain food issues. You know, there's some people who eat way too much meat and some people who don't eat any meat. And there are some people who are super vegan and some people who are super protein. And it takes a balancing act of trying to figure out where the source of your neuroses is running up against your physical makeup. And I think that that's something that people miss out on, is they think that everything's hyper spiritual and that you're only going to get ahead spiritually by doing practice. And that's why I say it's a spectrum, because to say that would be to negate plant medicine, herbalism, yogic practice, somatic therapy, float therapy, hot and cold therapy. There are so many thousands of different ways to heal. And I think that by allowing ourselves to explore more than just a couple of options, you know, even with psychedelics, even what we pair with psychedelics, you know, I'm going to give you an example of a really good week for me. Okay. And you're going to see, like, let's say I know I need to heal. And the reason why is because I've got grief. And a lot of people deal with grief. So what would I do first? Okay. Treating myself like I've got an open wound spiritually and psychologically. First thing I would do is go to a meditation center, and I would sit there long enough until I could really see why I'm hurting. And that'd be the first step, was figure out why I'm hurting. And once I determine it's grief, then the second thing that I would do is to get myself prepared to release the grief. And to prepare myself to release the grief, I would go to a colon hydrotherapist, because that means that every way that I've nourished myself has been in the vibration of grief. And so I've been poorly nourishing myself. So I need to take some things out before I put anything back in. When I'm in grief, my body moves sluggishly. I eat haphazardly, and what I may eat may not be very healthy for me. So I know this about myself. I'm going to go to the colon hydrotherapist, and I'm going to have her clean me out. Okay. So I clean out my stomach, and my mental health already improves, because I'm not aware of how the way I've been nourishing myself has been the vibration of an action in my mind that has been poisoning my body. And so I started to feel run down. My immune system starts to feel run down. It's a domino effect all the way to sickness and cancer. Okay. So stop that. I go get colon hydrotherapy. Then I go to the Russian bath, and I go and get a hot and cold ticket. You know, I pay $40 in San Francisco. Anybody can do this. You can go to the banya, and for 4 hours, you can go to any sauna you want inside there, and it goes up to 200 degrees. You put on a little felt hat, call it banya hat, and it's a Russian tradition, and you go in there and you sweat. And so you got to open up the pores, you know, and Native Americans have sweat lodge. So if I didn't have the opportunity to go to the banya, I'm going to go find a sweat. and I'm going to get really hot. Okay. And when my body gets to the point that it cannot physically take anymore, emotions are going to come out. And it's that pressure. I need to feel supported, and that heat puts pressure on the energy in my body that lets the cold out. And that cold, the energy of grief is a cold energy. It's missing warmth. It's missing love. It's missing compassion. You're missing someone, and so that's going to create a sucking sound, and that sucking sound brings in this evil sort of cold energy. That a lot of shamans in different traditions call it certain things, wind sickness and stuff. But grief is in the lungs, and wind sickness is in the lungs. So if grief is in the lungs and wind sickness is in the lungs, that means that grief is a wind sickness, according to Chinese medicine. Okay? And so to cure wind sickness, you're going to need yang energy, and yang energy is heat. Okay? And so if you've got yang energy, and fiery energy, fire on coals, water on fire on coals, that steam helps push all of that stagnant qi out of the lungs. And then you go and you sit in cold water. Then you cool your body down, and then you go into an ice bath and you super cool your body down so it absorbs any sort of trace of that cold energy with the vibration of grief, because that's what will kill you. That's what will give you bronchitis and pneumonia and emphysema, is when it becomes stagnant and poisonous to your body. And so you got to move that cold and get more heat, and move that cold and get more heat. And by the time you got out of it, if you can get them to get an oak branch and then beat the crap out of your back too, it'll knock the winter out of you. You'll be sitting there and be like, man, this feels so good. But in the tradition, we use a sort of a vanik, platska is what they call it. A vanik in ancient times was used for exorcisms. They take a big old English oak branch, and the old lady, with her boobs sticking out, and the guy's naked, he's laying down on his back, and she's going to vanik him. She's going to put the oak in a barrel that's full with hot water, create tea out of it that has aroma therapy that increases circulation in the body, that clears all sorts of inflammatory disease. And then when it gets hot and moist enough, she's going to beat it out and get all of the circulation going, get all of the muscles, back together. And that makes you feel reinvigorated. So you're like, okay, and so now you're simulating the hormones that were there at the time of you making love to someone. And that's like on a scientific level. You need dopamine, you need oxytocin and stuff. So now you got endorphins, now you got oxytocin and stuff. Now, so you don't feel so bad. Now you don't feel so bad. Okay. And then I would say now it's time for you to look at the cactus medicines. Now you're all dried off. You've all been, and this is where peyote comes in handy for lodge, sweat lodge, but because hikori and peyote is so controversial and people take advantage of it so much, San Pedro is where I would go from there. And that gives you access to all the dopamine receptors in the heart, because you see mescaline is the only natural phenylethylamine. And phenylethylamine is a precursor to PEA, which is the love molecule and the love hormone. So if you've got a broken heart, I wouldn't go towards mushrooms that are all serotoninogenic. You're going to get in your head about whether they loved you, whether they didn't love you, what are you going to do? It's all about you. You got to come down a level. You got to come to the heart level. So San Pedro cactus, Bobinsana, those heart-based MDMA, MDA, saffron, saffrol, sassafras, those class of medicines that can penetrate the dopamine receptor sites in the physical heart and then get those tissues working out different cramps and stuff. Man, listen, you'd be sitting there and you just pouring out tears. You're seeing the interconnectedness to the heart of humanity, to the ground, fundamental, primordial nature of love itself. And that love feeling is related to the heart and the vasoconstriction, the vasodilation. And then you start to realize your place in the universe and that you've lost nothing. And then you got questions about how reality works, how death works, how birth works, since you've gotten this experience with being connected to everything. Now you take a dose of mushrooms maybe 3 weeks to a month later. You want to space it out a little bit. In that meantime, you go meditate, you eat healthier, you don't eat with the vibration of grief, you pray over your food, you send positive energy into it, you start getting yourself stronger because you've been weakened from this grief. And then you take a microdose about a month afterwards, and you go for a long walk. And on that walk, you need to have somebody there who can talk, you can talk it out with, or journal or record and just cry and record and just sit there with a recorder and just be like, until you can release and verbalize what you've been suppressing, and then once you've done that, then go to an acupuncture specialist, because then your body may be receptive to letting things go. And now you're going to help your body let things go. So when they stick the needles, certain places, even moxibustion, using mugwort, before they created acupuncture, there's this thing called moxie, and moxa sticks are made of this rolled aged mugwort. And it also gets key system circulating, because we're an energetic body, we're a physical body, and we're a spiritual body. We've got all these bodies. And so you got to make sure the medicine is penetrating the deepest level, and the deepest subtle levels are going to be where you're going to hold a lot of trauma and you're going to hold a lot of pain. So you need medicine sometimes that can penetrate the walls of the heart, walls of the chest, the walls of the muscles, the lymphatic tissues, and move all that stuck lymph, move all that stuck fluid that's carrying the vibration of the trauma, and carry it out of the body in a creative way. And so I just listed a couple medicines. I'm not done yet, And then in between taking the San Pedro in a small dose and then taking mushrooms in a small dose, if you have the privilege, work with something like Sananga in the eyes, or an ibogamine dopaminergic reset molecule like iboga, I want to say Vajrayana, but it's voacongamine. But there are legal supplements like Tabernanthe mani that you can get on the internet from Australia that are cousins of the iboga plant, that have compounds in it that will reset the nociceptic process in the brain. And the nociceptic process is how your body stores pain and how it responds to trauma. And so the dopamine receptor sites, once you go through a traumatic incident, associate anything with that trauma with certain hormones that are produced automatically, certain cortisol, certain step proteins that are inflammatory, and you create chronic inflammation in the body with these fight or flight hormones that are produced automatically from the dopamine receptor sites in response to the trauma, whether it's pain or psychological. And so what Sananga will do, if you do it for 30 days, every single day, or Tabernanthe mani will do if you do it once every couple of weeks or so, or every other day or so, if you really feel like you need to really reset, is it will give you a chance to develop a different feeling, thought, and emotion, and a physiological process to go with those things for the traumas that you've gone through. And the problem that people face when doing this is they work jobs and they're around a lot of people. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you can't just break down crying if you need to, and decide that you're going to try and look at the trauma as being pinnacle to get you to this point of knowledge about yourself, because all traumas lead to self-knowledge. All traumas lead to self-awakening eventually. All these things that happen eventually lead us to ask deeper questions and lead us to understand suffering, and our understanding of suffering eventually makes us more compassionate people if we choose to do that with it. But it's choosing to make lead into gold. It's choosing consciously to make alchemy happen, not just to let it just sit on the surface and be a lived experience that serves no greater purpose other than making us feel hurt. It's to take it to the next level consciously. And iboga for me helped me to quit smoking, but I dealt with a certain level of stubbornness until I got to the point of my own mortality. And a lot of people do when they face serious addictions. They get to this point of struggling with their own mortality, and they start to feel as if their life isn't valuable or worth living anymore. And that's where practice comes in, because we like to think it's going to be easier once we die. But if we understand death and we understand it's a revolving door to birth and it creates its own causes and conditions, we lose this escapist, nihilist idea that somehow we are going to benefit ourselves or anybody else by taking ourselves out. And that's where practice of recalling what it means to have a precious human life is all about, is to recognize the qualities of leisure that we have, not being dead, not being ghosts, and not being extremely lazy, clinging to wrong views, being murderers, being rapists, being people who love to do bad things to other people. This is part of having a precious human existence, is that the causes and conditions that got us to this point led us to a place where we have the opportunity to practice compassion and wisdom, and to treat that as a precious thing or as a privilege, and to honor that privilege. And focusing on that will drive out a lot of this darkness that comes as a byproduct of grief, that leads us to feeling disadvantaged or victims of our trauma permanently, and it will be that torch of truth that drives out a lot of that negative energy. But
man, I want to just keep going.
Yeah,
we're actually already over time.
I'm so sorry.
Oh no, not at all.
Don't be. You got me captivated, and we need to have you on again.
And do just that. Just bring you on and say, take the floor. That was incredible. Thank you so much.
What you didn't say is where the conference was going to be.
Oh, it's online and in New York City, but it's online mainly, and you can get to it at psychedelicsangha.com. Let me see if I can just type that in here, psychedelicsangha.com. Let me hold on 1 second. Okay. Yeah, it's not .com. It might be .org. There it is. .org. Yeah, it's .org. Now I'm just going to copy this and put this in the chat. Sure. And welcome home, Misfit Seekers, is what it says. And then you go tickets. Let me see here if it has a Psychedelic Sangha conference. Yeah, Psychedelic Buddhism. No, it's not Psychedelic Buddhism. It's put on by Psychedelic Sangha, but psychedelicbuddhism.org. And here's the conference. Okay. And a lot of really great speakers are going to be there, and talking about in practice and application and context. Is it against the Pratimoksha vows? Because that's what everyone says. You say you're not going to do intoxicants, but psychedelics are intoxicants, and I beg to differ. It's all about intentionality, and there are cases in which you do not become intoxicated by psychedelics. Had 1 200-gram trip, and I was able to sit without fixation, fabrication, and I didn't have a trip. And that's an old school formula, but the trip was sitting, and disciplining the mind and using it for practice to develop a certain level of awareness. So yeah, that exists. It's real.
Oh, I look so forward to chatting again.
Absolutely.
But we do have to go. So thank you so much for being our guest, and we're going to book you right after when you stay on. But we got to go. So run the ads. Thanks to our sponsor. Thanks to Al. Thank you, Acacea.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.